Alright guys, so in this video, I'm going to be discussing the idea of surviving 9/11 if you were trapped above the impact zone, specifically on the North Tower. I'm going to be focusing on because in the South Tower, it's very simple. There was one stairwell that was open that you could potentially go to, although the South Tower was hit later and collapsed first, meaning you would have to act very quickly. We are going to be focusing on the North Tower because it stood for a while, and there is some things that I think you could potentially do, and this is kind of my explanation on how I would survive. Let's say I was in the restaurant at the time of the North Tower being hit, or preferably a little bit lower. Obviously, you don't want to be in the impact zone, but just above that, how would you actually be able to survive something like that? And guys, this is completely hypothetical. I think if I was in the real world actually in a situation like this, there's 0% chance I would survive, but this is just kind of a video I wanted to do, kind of branching off another video I did about 4 or 5 months ago on the man that actually did scale down the north facade of the Twin Towers. It's disputed on how many floors he was able to scale down the side. Some people think it was 10 floors. Other people think it was 20 floors. The reality is we don't know exactly how many floors it was because they didn't keep filming him. And then the South Tower collapsed. And the theory is that because the South Tower collapsed, he fell off in reaction to it just because it was such a crazy loud noise. That is the theory behind that. Now, how would I actually survive this? What I would do, let's just say I'm on the 98th and 99th floor. The first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to break a window on the opposite side of the impact zone, because if we're doing what that guy did to where he scaled down the side of it, kind of pushing himself up against the pillar walls of the Twin Towers, you're going to want to go on the opposite side of where the impact was to where the entire side of the North Tower is completely intact. So you want to go on the opposite side. And what I would do is you would break a window and you would start scaling down. The other key thing you want to note and you want to have something in your hand as you're shimmying down the side of the tower. And hypothetically, you could do this because of the way the Twin Towers were, with their window coverage only being 33%. They have the pillars going out, and you could prop yourself up, your back up against the one side, your feet up against the other side, and shimmy down really slowly. Obviously, this would be a terrible situation to be in. One misstep and you're dead. There's no harness, there's no safety net. But I'm just saying this would be the ideal thing to do, I think, in an effort to try and survive something that's almost impossible in terms of this event. So you shimmy down, but you have to carry with you something that will enable you to break a window. And once you get low enough, now obviously the people up there, they didn't know any of this. They didn't know the impact zone, where it was exactly. The fact that they could, go down 20 floors on the side, slide down, and then break a window and walk completely fine to the bottom of the North Tower, because theoretically that was possible. Under the North Tower, the stairwells were completely intact. So all you would have to do is go down about 20. I say that, all you would have to do, obviously, it is very hard, but I'm just saying, all you would have to do is shimmy yourself 20 floors down and then either get lucky with a broken window. Maybe somebody is going down. You bang on the glass and say, please break this. Let me in there. Or you break it yourself. I would imagine trying to break something, trying to break a window that is very dense, considering these were skyscraper windows, it would be extremely challenging considering the little leverage that you would have, being propped up with your feet up against the one side of the North Tower and your back up against the other side, knowing that if you went skinny or something happened, you would very likely fall off in terms of that. So that's the way I would do it. You would probably, because the issue that he ran into, he was going down, but unfortunately there were no open windows or no broken windows. And the other problem is if you actually tried to shimmy yourself all the way down the North Tower or the South Tower, either one, They're identical, obviously. You would run into, the way the North and South Tower were designed, the curvature of the bottom of the South Tower, you would run into it. It gets really skinny, and it's almost impossible to maneuver something like that unless you have some crazy harness or honestly like suction cups that you can stick to the side of it. That would be the only other way to do it. But obviously, this would have to be very quick thinking. But I do believe, yes, there is a possible way to do it. Obviously, with all of the stairwells being completely ripped apart, you cannot use the actual interior of the building to get to the bottom unless you get crazy lucky to where, let's say you're going somewhere, you reach the point where the impact zone is, and then you're able to randomly jump in an area within the Twin Towers to where you can access actual stairwells under the impact zone. Could that have been possible? Was there a way to maneuver? Personally, I highly doubt it. There might have been like 1 in a million chance to get down, but you're dealing with such toxic fumes at that point. If you get that close to the impact zone, it becomes a real issue. I will say one of the other advantages you would have by trying to scale down the towers is you're not dealing with the smoke because you're going down, and most likely, as long as you're along a side where there's not a lot of smoke, like that gentleman was, you could potentially avoid the smoke entirely as you descend on the side, shimmying down the Twin Towers. So that's how I would do it. Obviously there's also the idea maybe a helicopter could come, maybe there's some type of rescue. I just don't see it. The issue with the helicopter, as smoke continues to rise, the stairwells acted as a chimney. So even going up to the roof, the roof was locked. Even if you want to say, oh, they could break it, they could get the doors open. It was just such black smoke up there. It would be so hard to bang something against the doors that go to the roof while you're dealing with dark black smoke that was produced from the airplane crash, which created, a complete inferno. And then you're dealing with jet fuel smoke, which is next level dark and really bad. So I don't think that's very likely at all. I think the only real way you could do it, you either get very lucky within the interior of the Twin Towers and find some crazy way to where maybe the destruction the plane had on some of the area in the interior created some type of jump that you could do. It just seems so unlikely. Or you try and do the scale down method to where you're above the impact zone, you go to the one side that is completely intact, that was not hit by the plane, and you start scaling down, and then at a certain point, you have some type of bat or some type of thing to where you can immediately break the glass and then let yourself back in the North Tower, and you can just walk down and literally walk right out of the North Tower, possibly minutes before it collapses. That if that actually happened, it would be just a crazy story. Obviously, unfortunately, it did not happen. That's kind of the one way I could see where, unless you get crazy lucky on the interior. With the South Tower, obviously the angle at which it was hit, it enabled people to escape because the one stairwell was not compromised. In the North Tower, with it being hit dead on, all 3 of the main stairwells were gone. There was really no way to do that. Now, people didn't know it. They're dealing with a bunch of smoke. It's bad. I think the best thing you can do is try and get outdoors, and the way to do that is by shimmying down the side of it. You are outside in that case. You are exposed, and it is really risky. And obviously, this is completely just me looking back in retrospect. I would not do this. I'm sure in real life I probably, would not have a good time in there. This is just like kind of, looking back and hypothetically, what would I do in terms of potentially surviving this horrible event. Either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on X. Link to that's always in the description.